Hello, I'm House Democratic Leader Donna Lasinski. I'm here today because House legislative Republicans continue to hold up the majority of the $5 billion in federal stimulus funding needed for Michigan's recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic. It has now been 3 full months that our taxpayer money has been gathering dust in Washington, D.C., prolonging the suffering of Michiganders. House Democrats for weeks have asked for a simple up or down vote on bringing every penny of this federal funding back to Michigan. The funding being held hostage by legislative Republicans includes approximately $840 million in federal funding for schools. This money is what public schools need now, that they should have received by today for a safe return to in-person learning. Not tomorrow or a week from now, today. It's the latest example of schools and kids being held hostage by Republicans because they refuse to unleash all of the federal relief funding that we have funded as Michigan taxpayers that still sits in Washington, D.C. We have a way to bring home every penny of these federal stimulus dollars to Michigan today. A simple up or down vote on supplementals that release all of this federal money to our schools, to speed COVID vaccines, to make sure we have the equipment and protection we need to make sure educators and students are returned safely to our classrooms. There should be no legislative break until we bring all federal stimulus dollars home. Again, dollars that have already been paid for by Michigan taxpayers back to our state. This is particularly critical for our schools and the safety of our children, who today, March 22nd, have faced a deadline to return to schools or to not receive even more funding. Without these federal stimulus dollars here in Michigan, providing the PPE, the hygiene equipment, the rapid tests that we need to keep students, athletes, and educators healthy, it is unconscionable that those dollars sit in Washington, D.C. Now I would like to turn it over to Representative Regina Weiss, Democratic Vice Chair of the House Appropriations, School Aid, and Department of Education Subcommittee.
Thank you so much, Leader Lazinski. As a former educator, I know how challenging it is to run a classroom in the very best of times. And I'm the only member of the legislature that has taught during this most difficult period, right up to the point that I took my oath of office. And so I know personally that Michigan's hardworking, dedicated public school educators find new ways to do more with less every single day. COVID-19 has amplified the sacrifices made by our public schools to serve the needs of Michigan students. Schools need every single dollar of federal stimulus funding to keep their doors open and our kids safe. COVID-19 doesn't recognize district boundaries. That means that we must unleash all of the $840 million in federal relief funding for schools today. Some schools are having their funding held hostage by an arbitrary 20-hour in-person learning requirement that ignores local decisions and forces communities to scramble. We cannot, in good conscience, leave for spring break without getting this job done. Now I would like to turn it over to Ferndale School Board President Mike Davison.
Thank you, Representative Weiss. As the school board president of the Ferndale Public Schools, I can tell you firsthand, Michigan schools need every single federal stimulus dollar for a safe return to school. And we need it today, regardless of zip code. Every school district across Michigan has faced unique challenges during this pandemic. However, we all have one thing in common. We desperately need all federal stimulus dollars today for a safe return to in-person learning. It's needed to help ensure all schools can serve students through the rest of the school year. It's also needed for summer programs that will help students across Michigan recover any learning lost over the past year. This federal funding must be distributed by lawmakers so we can do our jobs and continue educating tomorrow's leaders. I call on Republicans to put the $840 million in federal stimulus up for a vote this week. Lawmakers don't deserve a spring break until this vote takes place.